with breaking news.
That breaking news, the family of Jamea Harris now suing former Tide star and NBA first-round pick Brandon Miller and 2 other men.
Court documents show Miller, Michael Davis, and Darius Miles are named in a wrongful death suit. The family's attorneys say they plan to prove the defendants' actions either caused or contributed to the death of their daughter. Harris was shot and killed in Tuscaloosa on January the 15th. The complaint says Miles left a
It is just after 1:30 in the morning on the Tuscaloosa Strip, and the street is still loud. Bars are closing. Groups of college students spill onto the sidewalk. Somewhere in that crowd, a young mother named Jamea Harris is laughing with her boyfriend and her cousin, unaware that in a matter of minutes, gunfire will end her life on a public street just blocks from a university campus that prides itself on tradition, discipline, and championship basketball. What happened next would become one of the most closely watched criminal cases in the history of college sports, not because of who died, but because of who was nearby when she did. Jamea Jonae Harris was 23 years old. She was from Birmingham, Alabama, and by every account from the people who loved her, she was devoted to one thing above all else, her young son. Friends and family have described her as warm, protective, and full of life, a woman building a future for her child, the kind of mother who showed up. On the night of January 14th, 2023, she made the 2-hour drive to Tuscaloosa with her boyfriend, Cedric Johnson, to visit family and enjoy a night out, the kind of ordinary evening that never should have ended the way it did. They went to a club on the Strip, the entertainment district that sits just off the University of Alabama campus, a place where students and locals mix late into the night. Harris was there with Johnson and her cousin, Asia Humphrey. It should have been an unremarkable night. But elsewhere on the Strip, a different group had gathered, young men who had spent the evening celebrating after the Alabama basketball team's win over LSU earlier that day. Among them was a 21-year-old named Michael Lynn Davis, a man with no official ties to the university, but a close, lifelong friendship with one of its rising players, Darius Miles. As the bars began to close around 1:30 in the morning, the two groups crossed paths on the street. What exactly sparked the confrontation remains disputed. Witnesses and later trial testimony described a verbal altercation. Accounts differ on precisely who said what and who escalated it first. But somewhere in that exchange, tempers rose, and what began as words did not stay words for long. Harris and her cousin walked to retrieve the Jeep Wrangler that Johnson had driven into town, planning to pick him up nearby. When the Jeep pulled up on Grace Street, Johnson got in. Harris was in the front passenger seat. Humphrey was in the back, and that is when Michael Davis approached the vehicle. According to prosecutors, Davis opened fire into the Jeep in what they would later call, in a Tuscaloosa courtroom, a cold-blooded ambush. Johnson, they say, fired back. The two men exchanged gunfire on a residential street in the pre-dawn dark, bullets tearing through the windshield and body of the vehicle. Davis was struck in the shoulder during the exchange, but one of the rounds he fired found Harris. She was hit in the chin, the bullet passing through her neck, as she sat trapped in the passenger seat with nowhere to go. Johnson, hearing Humphrey scream, sped away from the scene with Harris bleeding beside him. He did not know the streets of Tuscaloosa well. He drove desperately until he found university police officers stationed near the school's Walk of Champions, the very walkway lined with statues honoring Alabama's football glory. Body camera footage would later capture the moment Johnson arrived, inconsolable, repeating over and over, "My baby mama dead, man. My baby mama dead, man." Jamea Harris was rushed for medical treatment, but her injuries were catastrophic. She was pronounced dead in the early hours of January 15th, 2023. In the frantic minutes after the shooting, Davis did not go to a hospital or turn himself in. Investigators say he fled the scene and rode back with Darius Miles and Miles's girlfriend to an off-campus apartment complex called the Vi at University Downs. There, according to testimony, Miles placed a call to police at just after 2 in the morning, reporting that his friend had been shot, though he claimed at the time not to know how. Police responded to the apartment and began piecing together statements. Miles was eventually taken to the station, and more than 4 hours later, after investigators came to believe he was more than simply a witness, he was read his Miranda rights. What detectives uncovered in the days that followed reshaped the entire case. According to court documents and later testimony, in the tense minutes before the shooting, Miles had texted a teammate, Alabama's star freshman forward, Brandon Miller, asking him to bring a gun. Miller, prosecutors say, was not present for the initial confrontation, but he drove his car to the Strip that night, arriving around 1:43 in the morning. According to testimony, Miles and Davis then retrieved a handgun from the back of Miller's vehicle. Investigators would allege that this was the very weapon Davis used to fire into Harris's Jeep. Miller's attorney maintained that Miller did not know illegal activity involving the gun would occur. Authorities never charged Miller with any crime, and prosecutors never accused him of participating in the shooting itself. He cooperated with investigators throughout. In the aftermath, police said the murder weapon itself became a critical piece of evidence. According to testimony, after the shooting, Davis returned the gun to Miles, who then hid it, wrapped in a towel, tucked inside a drawer in a closet at the apartment. Investigators said the weapon was eventually recovered after the parents of another Alabama basketball player worked with a university attorney to help ensure it was turned over. It was a detail that, once made public, only intensified scrutiny on the basketball program and the university's handling of the case in its earliest hours. On January 15, 2023, the same day Harris died, both Darius Miles and Michael Davis were arrested and charged with capital murder under Alabama law. Miles was immediately removed from the Alabama basketball team. Under Alabama statute, the act of shooting into an occupied vehicle and causing a death qualifies as capital murder, meaning both men faced the possibility of the state's most severe penalties. Davis was accused of firing the fatal shots. Miles was charged not as the shooter, but under a theory of aiding and abetting. Prosecutors alleged he knowingly provided the gun used to kill Harris. The case ignited a national conversation almost overnight. Alabama's basketball team, led that season by Brandon Miller, soon to become a top pick in the NBA draft, was in the middle of one of its most successful runs in program history. The revelation that Miller had delivered the gun used in a fatal shooting, even without facing charges himself, forced uncomfortable questions about the culture surrounding elite college athletics, about proximity to violence, and about how institutions respond when tragedy brushes up against their most valuable assets. The University of Alabama faced public criticism for allowing Miller to continue playing while the investigation unfolded. Head coach Nate Oates publicly stated that Miller did not know a shooting would occur, a defense that did little to quiet the debate raging across sports media and beyond it. For more than 2 years, the legal process moved slowly. Both men were held without bond, denied release multiple times as the case wound through pretrial hearings, motions, and delays. Then, in May of 2025, Michael Lynn Davis stood trial in Tuscaloosa County Circuit Court. Prosecutors, led by Chief Assistant District Attorney Paula Whitley, argued that Davis had ambushed the Jeep in a matter of deliberate violence, not self-defense. The defense countered that Davis believed he was protecting himself, having seen a weapon inside the vehicle before the shooting began. After 4 days of testimony that included appearances from Brandon Miller and fellow player Jadon Bradley, the jury deliberated for a little over an hour. They returned a guilty verdict, capital murder. Judge Daniel F. Pruitt sentenced Davis, on the spot, to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the only sentence Alabama law allowed once prosecutors had taken the death penalty off the table. Outside the courtroom, Harris's mother, DeCarla Hurd, described the verdict as a measure of justice, though not the end of her grief. She spoke of returning home to hold her grandson, Jamea's son, 7 years old at the time, and of the hollow ache that no verdict could fully close. Davis's legal team has since stated its intention to appeal. Darius Miles's case has followed a far more uncertain path. Through his attorneys, he has pleaded not guilty, and his defense has argued that he acted defensively rather than criminally when he directed Davis toward the gun. A trial date was eventually set for December of 2025, but in the months leading up to it, Miles's legal team filed a motion seeking the recusal of Judge Pruitt, alleging bias in his handling of pretrial proceedings. The judge denied that motion, but the defense escalated the matter to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals, and in November of 2025, all proceedings in the case were formally paused pending that appellate review. As of this telling, Darius Miles remains in custody, his case unresolved, the question of his role in Jamea Harris's death still awaiting a jury's judgment. Separately, Harris's family pursued a civil wrongful death claim connected to the shooting, a case that was reported to have reached a settlement with Miller and Miles even as the criminal proceedings continued, a quiet resolution running parallel to a much louder public reckoning. What lingers beneath the headlines about a basketball program and a lottery pick who was never charged is the simple, devastating fact at the center of it all. A 23-year-old mother from Birmingham got in a car on an ordinary night out, and she never came home. Her son is growing up without her. Her family has spent more than 2 years walking in and out of courtrooms, listening to attorneys argue over motions and evidence, watching cameras follow the athletes connected to the case far more closely than they ever followed her. The story of Jamea Harris became, for much of the public, a story about college basketball, about a rising NBA star's uncomfortable proximity to violence, and about the questions universities face when the line between star athlete and bystander blurs in the worst possible way. But for the people who knew her, it has always been something simpler and heavier, the story of a young woman who should still be here, and a family that continues, case hearing by case hearing, to wait for something that no verdict can ever fully deliver.